On location this week from the Ignite Studios at the Fishers Branch Hamilton East Public Library, this is the Jacob Pyle Show. And here's your host, Jacob Pyle.
Thank you, Zach. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our final episode of the Jacob Pyle Show for the season. My name is Jacob Pyle, and I'm glad to have you with us for the next 30 minutes, unscripted conversations, but with a difference. No shouting, no cussing. All topics that are being discussed on the Jacob Pyle Show have been approved by me before the show taping. Tonight, as you can plainly see, it's just me all by my lonesome here at the Fishers Branch Hamilton East Public Library. When we had Lauren on as our guest a few weeks back, Lauren and I both thought that this was a good place to tape the Jacob Pyle Show. So I decided to do another episode here at the library today, and let me know in the comments below what you think of this little setup here. So, but like I said, we don't have a guest with us in studio tonight. We will have a surprise guest joining us later on in the show. Who's the guest, you ask? It's a surprise. I can't tell you till later on. So stay tuned for that. Since this is our last episode of the season, we are going to be in rerun mode between next week and the beginning of September. So I thought we would use this opportunity to look back on some of my favorite guests from past Jacob Pyle Show episodes. When asked who my favorite guest is, I always tell people it's like trying to pick out which of the kids is your favorite. It's that hard because every guest that has sat down with me these past several episodes have been really, really good. We will try to get as many clips in as time permits. Our first guest that we featured on our program back in February was a gentleman by the name of Robert A. Wilson. He had a lot to share about what he referred to as cowboy wisdom. Roll the clip. Now, before we get into cowboy wisdom, it might be a good idea to tell the folks at home who have never heard of it what it means.
Well, I was a cowboy when I got out of high school until I was 21. I went to, but I was a cowboy. We had 750 head of cows, and I grew up on a farm cattle operation. And I've never let go of the cowboy roots within myself. And all cowboy wisdom is kind of down home, grassroots wisdom. The way I expanded my life, and you learn a lot by trailing cattle and working with horses and animals because they have a mind of their own, but yet each animal is unique. Just like people, every person is unique. And what I really enjoyed about that is all the activities around the cattle, and we had 1,200 head of hogs also, but you got to actually understand yourself through the animals, because they all have a mind of their own, and we opened up to train them. And I did do bronc riding and bull riding, and I learned how to rope really well. Then I left the ranch because then I stopped roping when I left because them horses eat a lot of hay. And I really had a challenge watching something eat when I was working.
Right.
Now,
how's the weather there in Indiana?
Oh, it is going great. Everything in Indiana we're right now getting this program. This is today is actually February the 3rd, 2023, but the show's actually being taped, several weeks in advance right now, and it is like right now we're in the midst of trying to get a winter storm, and it's raining and snowing and all that, and it's crazy.
I grew up in South Dakota, so I can relate.
Yeah. All right. Now, how did you get your start doing these cowboy wisdom motivational coaching things?
I got into a home-based business, and they push personal growth, and they push expansion. And once I really grasped it and started doing it, I quit drinking alcohol when I started, and then I just kept going and going. But I got all caught up in, everybody uses a change, heal, create, transformation, all that. But about 2001, I wrote a book, and then I just kept going, but yet my life was never expanding. And in 2009, I discovered the word expand over the word change. And all expand does instead of change, it shuts down the memories you're trying to expand out of, because as soon as you say change, you got all the gamut of dammit connected to it, then it makes it a challenge. So by saying and using expand, I calmed the memories and it started expanding out of it. So in 2009, I discovered my liberating lingo of expand, energize, enterprise, and experience. Then my life started moving and rising out of my current situations.
Another guest we featured early on in our series was a man by the name of Anthony Session, otherwise known as the Mad Bus Driver. He went into this whole thing about, and by the way, he is a really funny comedian. He's really good. He went into this whole thing about what a typical day in his life is, and here's what he had to say about it. And you wanted to pretty much go over a typical day of what your day in the life is like. So go ahead, do your thing.
Yeah, it's a lot of folks, they'll go like, well, on the bus, like, well, how you doing today? I said, I'm doing good today, and I'm like, well, what do you got to do today? Oh, I just got to go and do some administrative work and stuff like that. I'm like, is that all? But people ask me, what's your day really like? I was like, it goes like this. Normally from 5 to 9 a.m., because let me just say this. When you're a bus driver, you wear a lot of hats. Bus drivers wear all sorts of hats because we need it to cover all kinds of areas and aspects of life at any given moment. So here's just a little preview. From 5 a.m. to 9 a.m., I'm a preacher, pastor, rabbi, monk, Islamic cleric, Buddhist leader, exorcism expert, followed by an underpaid psychiatrist. From 9 to 12, I'm a discount plastic surgeon, adult choir director, children's Sunday school nutrition and light punishment coordinator, followed by a bookkeeper and janitor. From 12 to 3, I'm a food program for the homeless director, baby christening overseer, bar mitzvah coordinator, bus wedding coordinator. Then from 3 to midnight, I'm legal counsel, marriage counselor, baptism and real cold water director. I like that one. Funeral director. And on Wednesdays, we have 50 cents off at the end of the month cremation services, just in case your money gets a little funny, followed by mortician and hearse driver.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, my day in the life is pretty much the same. Pretty much the same as yours, except it's backwards because I work night shift. So, and I'm not really gonna, because I do a podcast. I work a night shift job too, so it's kind of like it kind of goes both ways. When you performing those comedy acts, do you have you ever had any fan encounters or anything like that came to you and say, man, I loved your show. I mean, this is funny. I like what you're doing. Stuff like that.
Well, yeah, absolutely. That's what I mean. It's grown. I Helium Comedy Club in St. Louis. I play to a full house. 200, 250 people, 300 people, and I'd also like to say this. One of the things that people who get an opportunity to see me live appreciate, yes, there is a little bit of vulgarity, but I'm a storyteller, so right. When we say the word vulgarity, I don't say anything that's belittling, mean-spirited, or just nasty and unnecessary. Right. I don't use a bunch of vulgar stuff, stuff with unnecessary sexual connotations or, right. Body parts or, mean-spiritedness to women. I just sort of lay out there what a lot of people might not say, but they're thinking it.
We have to pause for this break. When we come back, we will have, among other things, one of my favorite Jacob Pyle Show moments of all time. Stay with us. Welcome back. My name is Jacob Pyle, and this is the Jacob Pyle Show. As you can see, we have no guests with us in the studio tonight. We are going to be doing a lot of reminiscing on previous guests we featured on this program. One of my favorite Jacob Pyle Show moments took place during an interview I did with Lori Kay. For those who haven't yet seen that episode, I encourage you to do so if you haven't. Lori Kay was responsible for conducting what she didn't know at the time was John Lennon's final interview before his assassination in 1981. In this clip, Lori Kay describes the events of what happened leading up to John Lennon getting shot and killed. Take a listen. Now, the news not long after you've done that interview, of course, the news comes out, you find out that John Lennon was assassinated and he passed away. What was your initial reaction to it when you first heard the story?
Well, I should say that the guys who were with me, the RKO team members and the executive from Warner Geffen, all went back to the West Coast. They had caught their flight already. I was the only one staying in New York that night because I was going to be having dinner with an old friend of mine. And as I left the Dakota, saying goodbye to them, they all got in our limousine because the guys were dropping John and Yoko off at the recording studio where they had a session coming up. I said goodbye, I hugged them all, I waved, and I started to walk up to my friend's office. And before I even got a couple of feet away, I was approached by a really obnoxious, creepy guy who kept saying, "Did you talk to him? What'd you talk about? Did you get his autograph? What's that?" And he wouldn't shut up and wouldn't leave me alone. And he kept following me. And I wanted to turn around and smack him, but I didn't. I just kept going. And finally, I had to turn around and give him a really dirty look and run away practically. And he finally stopped following me. So I got up to my friend's place and immediately told him about the great interview that I had, and we ended up going out to dinner. And when we got back to my friend's apartment, he said before he opened the door, "When I open the door, the radio is going to be on because I leave the radio on in case anybody tries to break in, then they'll think I'm home and they'll go away." So he opened the door, and all of a sudden, as he opened it, a reporter came on saying, "John Lennon has been shot. He's at the Roosevelt Hospital." And I gasped. I was horrified. And I immediately ran out into the street and caught a cab and went to the hospital. And there was a big glass front door, and I looked right through it. And there was Yoko holding on to somebody who was obviously a very good friend of hers, and crying, sobbing hysterically. And as much as I wanted to walk in and give her a hug and say, "Oh, Yoko, I'm so sorry," I realized just looking at her, it wasn't that John had just been shot. He'd been fatally shot. And even though that hadn't been announced, I just had that feeling in my heart that that's what happened. So I immediately went to the payphone outside and called the RKO New York headquarters, and spoke to my old newscaster boss, who was now the big executive there, and told her. And she said, "Oh my God, come here and, plan on spending the night here and working." And I did interviews all night. And sure enough, in just a few hours, the newscast came on saying John had been shot and killed, not just shot. And I felt horrible being right about that. And also watching the newscast, they were saying that the killer had already confessed, and they showed the killer, and that was that same creepy guy who'd followed me out of the Dakota. And I immediately started feeling the guilt that I've felt for well over 40 years now, because what if I had said to him, "Get lost, go away," and then gone to the security department at the Dakota and said, "You've got to get rid of this guy. He's bugging people. He shouldn't be here." Maybe they would have been able to get rid of him. And therefore John wouldn't have been shot. Or maybe they would have called the police, who would have been able to get rid of him. Or maybe they would have looked at him closely enough and seen that he had a gun that he was carrying in the pocket of his coat, which I didn't. So that's the reason of all the guilt that I felt over all these years. Part of the reason, I should say. So it was tragic. And then that morning, after staying up all night and working at the RKO network office, I went on the Today Show, which was really awful, and answered all their questions. And I hadn't slept, and I just felt so tragic. And I just wanted to leave. And so I immediately flew back to the West Coast and had to start writing the special with the John Lennon interview that was originally supposed to be a special aired on Valentine's Day of the next year. But of course, now that John had been killed, I had to write the special because it was going to air 6 days after the interview took place on that Sunday afterwards. And it was the hardest special I've ever written in my life, because I had to listen to the whole interview while sitting at the hotel that I was staying at. And it was awful, because it made me cry, because as much as I wanted to remember how wonderful the interview was, it hurt more knowing that John was dead. So I dedicated the special, of course, to Yoko, and finished writing it. And it was...
In the next few weeks, we are going to be re-showing all the episodes that take back in September of 2023 of a show known as Night Talk, which has a similar format to the Jacob Pyle show in that I'm talking to one guest for the whole 30 minutes. One of the guests we featured on Night Talk was a guy named Luke Austin Doherty. In this clip, Luke Austin Doherty talks about a toast with a very interesting hole. Here it is.
A couple of years ago, a little over 2 years ago, and if you're listening along on Instagram, the account for the toast, Toasty McToastertons, is the world through my toast hole. So I have my own. Everything me is Luke Austin Doherty. Luke Austin Doherty on this format, that format, whatever. But the toast has its own Instagram, and my wife, my new wife. We got married earlier this year, or I'm sorry, earlier last year. Time's moving fast. We were, at that point, not married yet, and we were in the Adirondacks. My daughter's with us, and we went to this place in New York in the Adirondacks called Key's Pancake House, also a great diner. And these pictures, the inception, the origin story, the instantaneous inspiration, as I've had thousands of 2 eggs and toast with bacon and put my jelly and so forth and dash Tabasco on. This toast came, right? And I noticed that it had this curious little hole, this little air pocket hole in it. So this piece of toast is over 2 years old now.
Okay.
Right? And I just saw the hole and I was like, I've never gotten a piece of toast like this that I can think of. And I picked it up and I looked at it and I was like, it's just kind of weird. It's goofy to look through the hole. And I just took my phone, same phone that I have because I hardly ever get a new phone, and I just snapped a picture of some other people that were there chatting and smiling. And I was like, what if as I'm just going through the rest of this trip, I just take some pictures of stuff through this hole? And as I thought about it, it's kind of like a haiku poem, because a haiku poem, 3 lines, 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables. You can write about anything, but you have to write about it in that tiny space. And that takes a knack to do it well. This is kind of like that. I can photograph anything. I photograph death, life, flowers, mountains, happy things, all kinds of stuff through this tiny hole, like this. And I had no idea at the time, 2+ years later, because I keep it in this thing in little silica packets that keep it dry, it's still there. And I'm still taking pictures, and it's weird, and it's goofy, but it's fun. And so that is the purpose. It's what I chose.
When we come back from this break, as promised, we will have that surprise guest join us. Stay with us. Welcome back. My name is Jacob Pyle, and this is the Jacob Pyle Show. As you can see, we have no guest with us in the studio tonight. We've been doing a lot of reminiscing on previous guests we featured on this program. Without further ado, our surprise guest is now joining us, if I can get this to work. Surprise guest, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear, Jacob.
Christina Ernie, ladies and gentlemen, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing great. Christina, will you help me introduce this last segment for me?
I would love to. Thanks for asking. When you're a host and a producer of a podcast like Jacob is, you're always in a race with time, and unfortunately, time usually wins. If you can recall from this past April, Jacob had the idea for our April Fool's Day episode of switching the tables around and having me interview him instead of Jacob interviewing me. It was such an amazing conversation between Jacob and I. Problem is, there were parts of the interview that we wish we could have shown you, but we never really got to because of the simple fact that we ran out of time. So for the remainder of our time together tonight, we are going to, or at least attempt to, show clips from our conversation that we never got to show you before. So what you are about to see has been taped a few months back, but has not been seen on the show until now. Roll the clip.
So, our viewers also know, in addition to doing this podcast, for the past 7 or 8 years, off and on, you've actually held a 40-hour weeknight night shift job. So, I don't want to have to make you tell me exactly what you do. I don't want you to lose your job over this, but I'm amazed, as I'm sure most people are, on how you managed to do that night shift. So, how did you decide that working nights was for you, and how do you manage it?
I've never been a morning person, and I actually got my mom to thank for that one as well. Even on a night that I'm not working, I typically don't go to bed till 3 or 4 in the morning and waking up at like 11 a.m. or 12 p.m. in the afternoon. So when I worked at McDonald's, I mainly worked days, but I always appreciate what the overnight crew does every night. Just seeing them there that late at night makes me want to work overnight. It's my first ever night shift job. I don't know how I managed to pull it off, but I stayed up all day. I think I might have took a nap before I left for work. My shift was from 9 p.m. and I got off work about 5 a.m. Except from the time I got home, which was around 6:30 a.m. till 3 in the afternoon. I was never a morning person. I couldn't stand waking up to an alarm going off at 5 or 6 in the morning.
So, what are these specific hours that you work, and do you prefer that or the second shift?
So basically I prefer thirds, to answer your second question. When I worked second shift, I mostly either arrived to work around 3 p.m. or 4 p.m. and I wouldn't leave work till 11 p.m. to midnight. You pretty much lose all social aspect because everybody's getting off work as you're going in.
Right.
For example, my first ever second shift job I was still living with my dad, just to kind of give you a little example. And either my dad would be asleep or he would be at work while I'm awake. Now keep in mind as I tell you this that my dad works day shift, so roughly you're talking 8 a.m. till 5 p.m. And let's just pretend that my second shift runs from 4 p.m. to 1 a.m. and then I don't go to sleep till 2 a.m. and I wake up at 11 a.m. the next day. So by the time I would get home at 1:30 in the morning, my dad's already in bed asleep. By the time my dad wakes up at 6 a.m., I would still be asleep after not getting off till late the night before. By the time I wake up at 11 a.m., my dad would already be at work. And by the time my dad gets home around 5:30 p.m., I would already be at work. Now, you can substitute my dad with my girlfriend, my boyfriend, or my husband, or whatever. Bottom line with second shift is that you will hardly see your loved ones when working the shift. I've seen people make it work, people that have kids and what have you. But sometimes, if you are lucky, you might see them on weekends, but that's if you are lucky and you don't have to work the weekend. Midnights, on the other hand, people say all the time that you don't get much of a social life on midnights either, and I actually have to disagree with that statement, and here's why. So at my current job, I work 10 o'clock at night, and I don't get off work till 7 a.m. the next morning. So the best thing about third shift as compared to second shift is you can manage your sleep any way you want. Second shift, the hours of 4 p.m. to 1 a.m. or whatever hours they have you set to come in at, is considered company time, and you don't have a choice but to be at work during those hours. Third shift, you can kind of choose what time to sleep and what time to wake up. I know some people who would stay up all day till about 11 a.m., 12 p.m. and wake up around an hour and a half, 2 hours before the start of their shift. Me personally, I'm one of those guys that will go to bed as soon as I get home from work, and I will wake up around 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. So it works for me because I'm waking up when everybody else is coming home from work, so that gives me a couple of hours in the evening to spend with my friends before I have to leave for work. I mean, but I know it's difficult. I know people that work 12-hour shifts, and so they really don't get to see a whole lot as far as family. But at the end of the day, how you manage your time between sleep and social life between shifts is completely up to you. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, that's wild. You have such a down to a science too, which is really, really cool that you're all set up like that. So, another question for you now, coming up in March was your 1 year anniversary, I believe, since moving to Noblesville, Indiana. Do I have that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So that's where you tape your show, of course. How did that come to be? How did your move come to be? And how are you enjoying Noblesville right now?
Well, the job I work at requires me to drive back and forth from my home in Noblesville to about the Westfield Carmel area, which is a small town about 30 minutes north of Indianapolis. When I first started this job, I was driving back and forth from my dad's house in Tipton to Carmel, which took me a half hour to get there. I was looking for places around Hamilton County, North Indianapolis area that I can move to. Problem is, rent is basically anywhere between $900 to $1,300. That's not including your electric. And some places you're also responsible for utilities as well. I then came across a Craigslist post from someone renting this upstairs duplex in Noblesville for almost $700 a month. And as soon as I saw it and I saw the place, I was like, how do I sign up? And now what used to be a 30-minute drive is now roughly a 15-20-minute drive.
That's pretty good. So I take it you like the community as well?
Yeah, Noblesville is a nice community. Actually, the whole Hamilton County area is a community in itself. I've taken part a lot of things, not just in Noblesville, but I've also taken part in events in Westfield and Fishers and you name it. And I've been proud to live here for this long.
That was such a fun conversation. Me and all of the viewers who watched the show really enjoyed getting to know you, Jacob. It was really fun. Well, listen, I know you got some stuff you want to say as well, so all I have to say left is from my home in Rhode Island, I'm Christina Ernie. Jacob, back to you.
Thank you, Christina, very much. That not only wraps up tonight's episode of The Jacob Pyle Show, it also wraps up this remarkable first season of The Jacob Pyle Show. My first thanks goes out to the many guests that have sat opposite me on the show. Most of these episodes, I am meeting the guests for the first time as we are taping the show, and the fact that, they were willing to get out of their comfort zone and come on and talk about whatever they were willing to talk about on the show is extremely amazing. I learned a lot just talking to them, as I'm sure most of you did too. Now to my two friends that play a small part in our show. First, to our special contributor, Christina Ernie. You are very talented and very good at what you do. Thanks for everything you've contributed to our show, and thank you for the amazing friendship and for understanding what we do. Now to my right-hand man, our regular announcer on the show, Zach Brown. Thank you for contributing your voice to each week's show. The announcer on each week's show plays a very small part in our show, but it is also an important aspect to our show as well. And I thank you for all you do for our show. Finally, my last set of thanks goes out to you, our viewers. Without you, there would be no Jacob Pyle Show. To quote Johnny Cash, who is one of my favorite country singers of all time, he closed his final episode of his variety show by saying this: "All things come in cycles and in seasons. Good or bad, they come to an end." You will continue to see me in reruns throughout the summer, beginning with a re-showing of the 5 episodes we taped of Night Talk that was shown in August-September of last year. We'll be back in September of this year with a brand new series of shows, and I hope you can join us then for that. And as we say around here every week, for Zach Brown, Christina Ernie, and all of us on the Jacob Pyle Show, I'm Jacob Pyle. Thank you all for watching. Good night, everybody. And if I don't see you between now and September, I hope you have a very happy and prosperous summer.
If you want to be a guest on the Jacob Pyle Show, or if you'd like a DVD copy of tonight's program, send Jacob an email. His email address is jtpyle1@aol.com. Or if you're ordering a DVD copy of tonight's program, send $10 check or money order to the Jacob Pyle Show, care of Pyle Media Ventures. Post Office Box 154, Noblesville, Indiana 46061. Please include the air date seen on your screen when ordering. Residents outside of Indiana add $5 shipping and handling. Join us next week on the Jacob Pyle Show, where Jacob's guest will be Automation Manager Chuck Ridgway. This is Zach Brown speaking for the Jacob Pyle Show, a Pyle Media Ventures presentation. This program has been pre-recorded.